The galactic childcare station orbiting Kepler 442b was, on any given day, about as peaceful as a neutron-star collision, which is to say, not at all. Picture a massive ring-shaped structure spinning lazily through space, its transparent aluminum walls offering breathtaking views of the gas giant below. Before we begin, YouTube shows me that 93% of you haven't subscribed yet. Subscribing is free, it really supports our community, and I'd love for you to be part of it. Also, drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Now fill that structure with 236 alien children from 15 different species, each with their own unique way of causing absolute mayhem. Add a staff of 23 beings who'd somehow convinced themselves that managing interspecies daycare was a reasonable career choice, and you've got yourself a recipe for controlled chaos. Or in today's case, completely uncontrolled chaos. Zoe Harper, no, wait, scratch that. Just Zoe stood in the center of Recreation Bay 3, watching a young crystalline attempt to eat a holographic butterfly while two tentacled Orions engaged in what could generously be called aggressive hugging, and was more accurately described as attempted strangulation. Her dark hair was pulled back in a ponytail that had seen better days, and her standard-issue blue jumpsuit bore the battle scars of someone who'd spent the morning mediating a dispute between a methane-breathing glub and a hydrogen-preferring zephyr over playground equipment that was, technically, designed for neither of their species. Oh, for the love of Craxus, put down the sonic disruptor! That's not a toy, Zoe called out to a six-eyed purple creature who was gleefully waving around what looked suspiciously like a miniature weapon of mass destruction. The creature chirped something that the universal translator helpfully rendered as, "But it makes the pretty lights." "The pretty lights will pretty much vaporize half the station," Zoe muttered, striding over to confiscate the device. "And I've got enough paperwork as it is." This was Zoe's life now. 3 years ago, she'd been a perfectly normal kindergarten teacher on Earth, dealing with perfectly normal human children who did perfectly normal things like eating glue and announcing they needed to use the bathroom right after being asked if anyone needed to use the bathroom. Then the Galactic Childcare Initiative had come knocking, offering her a position that would utilize her expertise in child development across species barriers and provide invaluable experience in interstellar cultural exchange. What they'd failed to mention was that child development across species barriers meant preventing a sludge baby from absorbing the class pet, and interstellar cultural exchange involved learning how to say, "Please don't set your classmate on fire," in 19 different languages. Still, she had to admit, the job had its perks. Where else could you watch 3 suns set simultaneously while a baby quantum drake hiccuped itself into a parallel dimension? Zoe. The voice belonged to Gron, the station's administrator and the proud owner of 6 arms, which he used with remarkable efficiency to juggle 17 different communication devices while simultaneously filing reports and stress-eating what appeared to be crystallized anxiety. "We've got a situation." Zoe glanced around the room. Craxus was now using the confiscated sonic disruptor as a percussion instrument. The crystalline child had moved on from holographic butterflies to attempting photosynthesis under the artificial sun lamps. And something that looked like a cross between a hamster and a small tornado was spinning in excited circles near the juice dispensers. "More of a situation than usual?" she asked, raising an eyebrow. Gron's 4 eyes, the standard number for hectarians, though he'd mentioned in passing that his cousin had 8 and was insufferably proud of them, blinked in sequence, which Zoe had learned was the equivalent of a very deep sigh. "The Fluffic cubs are missing." Now that got Zoe's attention. The Fluffics were, well, Imagine if someone had taken a teddy bear, given it the energy level of a caffeinated squirrel, and the survival instincts of a lemming with a death wish. They were adorable, destructive, and had an almost supernatural ability to find trouble in places where trouble shouldn't technically be able to exist. "Which ones?" Zoe asked, though she already had a sinking feeling she knew the answer. "Rotko, Squeeb, and Tiny." Yep. The terrible three, as the staff had taken to calling them. Rotko was the ringleader, a ball of orange fluff with oversized ears and the strategic mind of a tiny, fuzzy Napoleon. Squeeb was his lieutenant, slightly smaller, but twice as sneaky, with a talent for getting into spaces that physics suggested should be impossible. And Tiny, despite his name, was the largest of the three, a gentle giant who would follow his friends into any dangerous situation with the unwavering loyalty of a golden retriever. "How long have they been missing?" Zoe asked, automatically doing a mental inventory of all the places she'd seen the cubs earlier that day. 3 hours, Gron replied, and all 6 of his arms gestured frantically. "We've checked the play areas, the nap pods, the food dispensers, even the quantum sandbox, though how anything that weighs more than a photon could get in there is beyond me." Before Zoe could respond, the air shimmered and resolved into a 3-dimensional hologram of what appeared to be the most anxious alien parents in the galaxy. Emperor Grishnak and Empress Voltura of the Fluffic Empire stood, or rather paced frantically, in what looked like a throne room decorated entirely in shades of panic. Emperor Grishnak was a larger version of the cubs, his orange fur standing on end in ways that suggested he'd been running his claws through it for hours. His crown sat slightly askew, and his usual regal bearing had been replaced by the universal posture of a worried parent. Hunched shoulders, darting eyes, and the kind of nervous energy that made everyone around him want to start pacing. Empress Voltura was somehow managing to look even more distressed, her silver fur practically vibrating with anxiety. Her voice, when she spoke, carried the particular pitch that all parents achieved when their children had been out of sight for more than 30 seconds. "Administrator Gron," she began, and even through the hologram, Zoe could see her whiskers twitching with stress. "Please tell me you've found them." Gron's expression, which on a Hectarian involved a complex interplay of eye movements, tentacle positions, and the angle of his head spikes, conveyed the kind of diplomatic panic that came from having to tell galactic royalty that their children had somehow vanished into thin air. "We're conducting a comprehensive search, Your Majesties," he said, which was administrator speak for, "We have absolutely no idea where they are, but we're looking very hard." "A comprehensive search?" Emperor Grishnak's voice rose to what could generously be called a royal screech. "Our children have been missing for 3 hours. 3 hours. Do you have any idea what can happen to Fluffic cubs in 3 hours?" Zoe, who had spent considerable time with the cubs in question, could think of several dozen things that could happen to them in 3 hours, most of which involved structural damage to the station and at least one interspecies incident requiring diplomatic intervention. "Sir," Gron began, "I want to assure you that we have our best people on this—" He was interrupted by the arrival of Eula, the station's security chief. Eula was a Vorthak, which meant she looked like someone had taken a praying mantis, given it crystal armor, and taught it advanced combat techniques. Her multifaceted eyes could track 17 different movements simultaneously, and her natural ability to phase shift through solid matter made her exceptionally good at finding things that didn't want to be found. The fact that she looked as frustrated as a crystalline insect could look was not encouraging. "Status report," Gron asked, though his tone suggested he already knew it wasn't going to be good news. "We've searched every accessible area of the station," Eula reported, her voice carrying the harmonic resonance that made all Vorthax sound like they were speaking through a crystal cave. Maintenance shafts, storage compartments, even the waste reclamation units, though I want to go on record as saying that checking the garbage disposal systems for missing children is not what I had in mind when I took this job. "And," Gron prompted, "nothing. It's like they vanished into space itself." The holographic royal parents exchanged a look that parents across the galaxy would recognize. The moment when worry transitions into full-scale panic. "This is unacceptable," Empress Voltura declared. "Those are the heirs to the Fluffic Empire. If anything happens to them—" "Nothing is going to happen to them," Zoe interrupted, speaking for the first time since the crisis had been announced. "They're probably just playing hide-and-seek and found a really good hiding spot." 6 pairs of alien eyes, not counting the dozen or so belonging to the holographic parents, turned to stare at her. "Hide-and-seek?" Emperor Grishnak repeated, as if the concept was foreign to him. "It's a human game," Zoe explained patiently. "One person closes their eyes and counts, and everyone else hides. Then the counter tries to find the hidden players." The silence that followed this explanation was the kind of silence that suggested everyone present was trying to figure out how to politely tell the human that she was being ridiculous. "Zoe," Gron said carefully, "we've been searching for 3 hours. This isn't a game." "With respect, Administrator," Zoe replied, and anyone who'd spent time with humans would recognize that phrase as the verbal equivalent of loading a weapon. "You don't know the cubs like I do." Rotko loves games, Squeeb loves puzzles, and Tiny loves following his friends. Put them together, and they could hide in plain sight for days if they wanted to. This, as it turned out, was more prophetic than anyone present could have imagined. Just then, Dr. Com materialized, literally, as was their species' preferred method of transportation, in the center of the room. Dr. Com was a nexus, which meant they looked like someone had crossed a spider with a hologram and given the resulting creature medical training. Their 8 legs moved in perfect synchronization, and their translucent body shimmered with patterns that conveyed emotional states more clearly than any facial expression ever could. Right now, those patterns were showing what the universal translator would have rendered as professionally concerned with undertones of impending hysteria. "I've completed the medical sweep," Dr. Com announced, their voice carrying the multi-harmonic tones that made all Nexus sound like a choir of concerned physicians. "No signs of distress, injury, or unusual biological activity anywhere on the station." "Which means they're either perfectly fine," Gron said, "or they're not on the station anymore." The holographic parents went very, very still. "Not on the station?" Empress Voltura whispered. That's not possible," Emperor Grishnak added, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself as much as anyone else. Eula's crystalline armor made soft chiming sounds as she shifted her weight, a sign that she was accessing her internal databases at high speed. "I've reviewed all transport logs for the past 6 hours," she reported. "No unauthorized departures, no emergency evacuations, no maintenance shuttles that could have accidentally taken passengers. Whatever happened to them, they're still somewhere on this station." "Then where are they?" Gron demanded, and for the first time since Zoe had known him, all 6 of his arms were gesturing in exactly the same direction, which in Hectarian body language meant something between "I am completely baffled" and "someone is about to get fired." Zoe looked around the room at the assembled aliens, each one representing millions of years of evolution and thousands of years of technological advancement, all of them stumped by 3 missing children, who probably weighed less than a standard spacesuit when combined. She adjusted her shoulders slightly, her jumpsuit really was getting itchy today, and shrugged. "They'll turn up," she said simply. "They always do." What followed could only be described as organized pandemonium, if such a thing were possible. Which, given that this was a space station designed to contain the chaos of alien children, it apparently was. The first sign that this was going to be more than a simple case of lost and found came when Gran activated the station-wide emergency protocols. Lights shifted from their usual warm yellow to an urgent orange, and automated announcements began broadcasting in 17 languages, requesting that all staff report to their designated search stations immediately. The second sign came when those same announcements were followed by the unmistakable sound of 233 remaining alien children responding to the crisis with all the calm and rationality you'd expect from beings whose ages ranged from barely able to walk to convinced they know everything about the universe, which is to say, none at all. "Attention station personnel," boomed the voice of the automated system, its tone carrying the kind of artificial authority that only made everyone more nervous. "We are now under lockdown protocol orange. All children are to remain in designated safe areas under direct supervision." What the automated system apparently hadn't considered was that telling a bunch of alien kids they were under lockdown was roughly equivalent to announcing that the most exciting thing ever was happening somewhere else, and they were missing out on it. Within minutes, Recreation Bay 3 had transformed from controlled chaos into what could generously be called barely contained anarchy. The crystalline children had formed what appeared to be a prayer circle around the holographic butterfly dispenser, humming in harmonics that made the walls vibrate. The tentacled Orions had organized themselves into a search party and were systematically checking every corner of the room with the kind of thoroughness that suggested they'd appointed themselves junior detectives. And Craxus had somehow convinced half a dozen other species that the sonic disruptor was actually a dowsing rod for finding lost cubs. "This is not helping," Eula observed, her crystalline armor shifting through several shades of exasperated blue as she watched a young plasma former accidentally set a playmat on fire while helping with the search. "Nothing about this situation is helping," Gran replied, frantically coordinating search teams through his multiple communication devices. "Team Alpha, check the hydroponics bay again. Team Beta, I want a full scan of the observation decks. Team Gamma, why are you in the cafeteria?" "The cubs like snacks," came the tinny reply through one of his communicators. "We thought maybe they got hungry and they can't reach the food dispensers. Maybe they climbed on something?" Gran made a sound that the universal translator couldn't quite process, but which conveyed the essence of administrative despair. Meanwhile, the holographic royal parents had reached the stage of panic that parents throughout the galaxy would recognize, the point where logic abandoned ship and every horrible possibility became not just plausible, but inevitable. "They could have been kidnapped," Emperor Grishnak was saying, pacing back and forth so rapidly that his hologram was starting to flicker. "Pirates! Space pirates with a particular interest in adorable royal children. Or they could have wandered into a maintenance shaft and gotten lost in the ventilation system," Empress Voltura added, her voice rising with each word. "Do you know how many kilometers of ventilation shafts this station has?" 43. Eula answered automatically, then immediately looked like she regretted providing that information when both parents turned to stare at her with the kind of intensity that could melt hull plating. 43 kilometers! The Empress shrieked. "Our babies could be crawling through 43 kilometers of dark, cold, scary." "Your Majesty," Dr. Com interrupted gently, their translucent form pulsing with calming colors. Fluffic cubs are remarkably resilient. Their natural insulation would protect them from temperature variations, and their enhanced hearing would help them navigate even in darkness. This was meant to be reassuring. Instead, it had the effect of making both parents look even more worried. Enhanced hearing means they can hear everything, Emperor Grishnak said slowly. All the scary mechanical sounds, all the humming and buzzing and, oh no, what if they're terrified? It was at this point that Zoe decided the situation had moved beyond mildly concerning and into someone needs to take charge before the royal parents have matching nervous breakdowns. "Your Majesties," she said, stepping closer to the hologram projectors, "with respect, you're not helping." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggested several people were wondering if the human had just committed treason. "Excuse me," Empress Voltura said, her voice dropping to the kind of quiet that preceded either tears or violence. "Your cubs are smart, brave, and resourceful," Zoe continued, apparently deciding that since she'd already started down this path, she might as well commit to it. "Rotko has gotten out of every child-proof lock we've installed. Squeeb once figured out how to open a quantum puzzle box that was supposed to be impossible for anyone under the age of 50. And Tiny once carried both his friends to safety when a gravity generator malfunctioned in Recreation Bay 5. She paused, noting that she had everyone's attention now. "They're not helpless babies lost in the dark. They're three of the smartest, most capable kids on this station. If they're hiding, it's because they want to be hiding. And if they wanted to be found, they would be." "But why would they want to hide for hours?" Emperor Grishnak asked, some of the panic leaving his voice. "Because," Zoe said with the kind of patience that came from years of explaining child logic to confused adults, "they're kids. Maybe they found something interesting. Maybe they're playing a game. Maybe they're taking a nap somewhere cozy and don't realize everyone's looking for them." As if summoned by her words, the station's communication system crackled to life. "Administrator Gron," came a voice that belonged to Sick, one of the freelance security consultants the station occasionally hired for situations that required, shall we say, a more flexible approach to problem-solving. "I'm boarding now." Gron's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, this time in what Zoe was learning to recognize as the Hectarian equivalent of, "Oh, what fresh hell is this?" "Sick," he said carefully. "I didn't call you." "No," came the reply, accompanied by the unmistakable sound of an unauthorized docking clamp engaging with the station's hull. The Fluffic Empire did. Something about missing heirs and a substantial reward for their safe return. All eyes turned to the holographic royal parents, who had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "We may have taken some additional precautions," Emperor Grishnak admitted. "You hired a bounty hunter?" Eula asked, her crystalline armor shifting to a shade of blue that suggested she was reconsidering her career choices. "We hired the best bounty hunter in this sector," Empress Voltura corrected. "If anyone can find our children, it's Sick." 5 minutes later, Sick strode into Recreation Bay 3 with the kind of confidence that came from never having met a problem he couldn't solve with sufficient application of advanced technology and creative thinking. He was a Kethtar, which meant he looked like someone had taken a panther, given it opposable thumbs, and taught it to use really, really expensive equipment. His sleek black fur was complemented by a utility harness that held more gadgets than most spaceships carried, and his golden eyes moved constantly, taking in every detail of the room with the kind of professional assessment that made everyone suddenly very aware of how chaotic everything looked. "Status report," he said, his voice carrying the kind of authority that made people want to snap to attention even when they weren't technically under his command. 3 Fluffick cubs, missing for approximately 4 hours, Gron replied, apparently deciding that cooperation was preferable to argument. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play, no indication of how they left their designated area. Sick nodded, pulling a device from his harness that looked like a cross between a tricorder and a very sophisticated magic wand. Ages? All under 5 standard years, Dr. Com supplied. Behavioral patterns? Curious, intelligent, and possessed of a complete disregard for the concept of danger, Zoe answered before anyone else could respond. 6 golden eyes fixed on her for a moment, and she had the distinct impression that she was being catalogued as either a valuable resource or a potential obstacle. "You're the primary caretaker for this age group?" "One of them," Zoe replied. "But yes, I spend the most time with the cubs." "When did you last see them?" Zoe thought back through the day, mentally retracing her steps. "This morning, during free playtime, around 1000 hours, station time. They were playing with the magnetic building blocks in the corner." She gestured toward the area in question, where the aforementioned blocks were now scattered across the floor in what appeared to be the aftermath of a small explosion. "And their behavior was normal?" "For them? Absolutely. Rotko was trying to build something that looked suspiciously like a catapult. Squeeb was figuring out how to make the blocks stick to surfaces they weren't supposed to stick to, and Tiny was following them around and occasionally eating the smaller pieces." "They eat the toys?" Sick asked, sounding mildly concerned. "Fluffick cubs can safely digest most synthetic materials," Dr. Com explained. "It's part of their natural development process, though we do try to discourage it when possible." Sick made a note on his device and began scanning the room with equipment that beeped, whirred, and occasionally made sounds like a very confused bird. After several minutes of this, he straightened up and shook his head. "No thermal signatures, no unusual chemical traces, no signs of struggle or distress," he reported. "It's like they simply ceased to exist." "Which is impossible," Eula pointed out. "Improbable," Sick corrected. "Very little is actually impossible if you have the right technology." "Are you suggesting someone used advanced technology to kidnap 3 children from a secure facility?" Gron asked, and all 6 of his arms were now making gestures that suggested he was calculating the insurance ramifications of that possibility. "I'm suggesting we expand our search parameters," Sick replied diplomatically. "Has anyone checked the areas of the station that aren't technically accessible to unauthorized personnel?" "You mean like the command center?" Eula asked. "The power distribution hub? The life support systems?" "Exactly." "Those areas are sealed," Gron protested. "No one can get in without proper authorization codes." Sick's expression, what could be seen of it beneath his professional demeanor, suggested that he'd heard that particular claim before, and found it about as convincing as a chocolate airlock. Nevertheless, he said, "I'd like to check them." Which was how, 20 minutes later, Zoe found herself following a bounty hunter, a crystalline security chief, a 6-armed administrator, and a translucent doctor through sections of the station she'd never seen before. Behind them, automated systems continued their cheerful announcements about lockdown protocols, while the remaining children continued their enthusiastic interpretations of helpful behavior. The command center was a marvel of engineering efficiency, with holographic displays showing every system on the station in real time. It was also completely empty of small, furry beings who might be considered missing. The power distribution hub was a cathedral of humming energy conduits and blinking status lights. It was also completely empty of small, furry beings who might be considered missing. The life support systems were a maze of atmospheric processors and oxygen recyclers that somehow managed to keep several hundred beings with completely different environmental needs breathing comfortably. They were also completely empty of small, furry beings who might be considered missing. "This is ridiculous," Gron muttered, after they'd spent an hour searching areas that cubs couldn't possibly have accessed. "We're looking in places that require maintenance clearance to enter." "Unless," Sick said thoughtfully, "they didn't enter these areas through conventional means." "What other means are there?" Eula asked. Before Sick could answer, his communication device crackled to life. "Sick, this is your ship's AI. I'm picking up some interesting readings from the station's internal sensors." "What kind of readings?" Sick asked, immediately alert. "Intermittent life signs in sections of the station that should be empty. Very small life signs, moving in patterns that don't match any of the station's regular personnel." Everyone exchanged glances. "Where?" Eula demanded. "That's the strange part," the AI replied. "They seem to be everywhere, moving through the station in a regular pattern, but not staying in any one location long enough for a clear lock." "How is that possible?" Dr. Com asked. "It's not," Sick said grimly. "Unless—" He trailed off, staring at something on his scanner. "Unless what?" Gron prompted. "Unless they're not moving through the station," Sick said slowly. "Unless they're moving with something. Or someone." And just like that, every eye in the group turned to look at Zoe, who was getting the distinct feeling that her nice, quiet day of managing alien children had taken a very unexpected turn. "Now wait just a minute," she began, but was interrupted by her jumpsuit's collar, which chose that exact moment to itch in a way that made her roll her shoulders and adjust the fabric around her neck. The motion caused what sounded suspiciously like a very quiet, very satisfied purr to drift from somewhere in the vicinity of her left shoulder. The silence that followed was the kind of silence that suggested everyone present was trying to decide whether they'd actually heard what they thought they'd heard, or if the stress of the situation was causing auditory hallucinations. "Zoe," Eula said very carefully, "was that you?" "Was what, me?" Zoe asked, though she was pretty sure she knew exactly what Eula was talking about. "That sound." "What sound?" Another adjustment of her collar produced another soft purr, this one from the vicinity of her right shoulder. "That sound," Dr. Com said, their translucent form beginning to pulse with colors that suggested extreme scientific interest mixed with growing suspicion. Zoe looked around at the assembled group of highly trained, technologically advanced alien beings, all of whom were staring at her with expressions ranging from confused to accusatory. She sighed. "Okay," she said, "but in my defense, they started it." What happened next could only be described as the moment when 6 highly intelligent beings simultaneously realized they might have been outsmarted by someone who considered snack time a legitimate scheduling priority. "They started what, exactly?" Sick asked, his golden eyes narrowing with the kind of professional interest that suggested he was rapidly recalculating his entire approach to this case. Zoe shifted uncomfortably, causing another soft sound that was definitely not mechanical, definitely not atmospheric, and definitely coming from somewhere very close to her person. "Well," she began, then stopped as all eyes in the group focused on her with laser-like intensity. "You have to understand, Fluffic cubs have very specific comfort needs." "Comfort needs," Gron repeated slowly, all 6 of his arms frozen in mid-gesture. "They're pack animals," Zoe explained, as if this clarified everything. In their natural environment, cubs stay close to the adults for warmth, security, and protection. The problem is, most of our staff are— She gestured vaguely at the assembled group. Not exactly built for that kind of close contact. Dr. Com's translucent form began cycling through colors that the universal translator was having trouble interpreting, but which seemed to hover somewhere between fascination and impending medical emergency. "Are you telling us," Eula said, with the kind of careful precision that suggested she was trying very hard not to jump to conclusions, "that those cubs are using you as a surrogate parent figure?" "More like a mobile comfort station," Zoe replied. "Humans have the right body temperature, we're soft in the right places, and we don't have any protruding spikes, crystalline formations, or energy fields that might interfere with nap time." The silence that followed this explanation was broken by what was unmistakably the sound of three small beings settling into more comfortable positions somewhere in the general vicinity of Zoe's upper body. "Zoe," Gron said, and his voice carried the kind of administrative calm that came from years of dealing with situations that defied both logic and standard operating procedures. "Are you currently wearing 3 missing Fluffic cubs?" "Wearing is such a strong word," Zoe replied. "I prefer to think of it as providing mobile childcare services." Sick, to his credit, was the first to recover from what could generously be called professional bewilderment. His scanner was already out and running, and the readings it was displaying were causing his fur to stand on end in ways that suggested either excitement or the early stages of a nervous breakdown. "According to this," he said, studying the device with the kind of intensity usually reserved for disarming explosive devices, "there are indeed 3 small life forms in extremely close proximity to your position. Heart rates consistent with sleep, body temperatures within normal ranges for Fluffic physiology, and—" He paused, looking at the scanner as if it had just insulted his professional competence. "And they appear to be purring." "Fluffics purr when they're content," Dr. Com added helpfully, their form now a steady shade of blue that suggested they were finding this entire situation medically fascinating rather than alarming. "So let me get this straight," Eula said, her crystalline armor shifting through several shades of what could only be described as security chief having an existential crisis. "For the past 6 hours, while we've been tearing this station apart looking for 3 missing children, they've been taking a nap in your clothing." "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds unreasonable," Zoe said defensively. "It is unreasonable," Gron exploded, all 6 arms gesturing frantically. "Do you have any idea what we've been through? The panic, the emergency protocols, the royal parents who are probably planning to declare war on our entire sector if their children aren't found safe and sound." As if summoned by his words, the air shimmered, and the holographic forms of Emperor Grishnak and Empress Voltura materialized in their midst. Both parents looked like they'd aged several years in the past few hours, their fur disheveled and their royal bearing replaced by the universal posture of parents who'd moved beyond worry into the realm of barely contained hysteria. "Administrator Gron," Emperor Grishnak began, his voice carrying the kind of royal authority that was being held together by nothing more than parental determination and possibly several cups of very strong caf. "Please tell me you have news." "We do, Your Majesty," Gron replied, glancing at Zoe with an expression that suggested he was still trying to figure out whether to promote her or have her confined to quarters. "Your children have been located." "Where?" Empress Voltura demanded, her voice rising to a pitch that made several of the communication devices start producing feedback. "They're—" Gron paused, apparently trying to find words that would convey the situation without causing either parent to have a complete Breakdown. They're safe. They've been safe this entire time. They've been with Zoe. With the human caretaker? Emperor Grishnak asked, confusion replacing panic in his voice. But we've been watching the search through the security feeds. We never saw them with her. That's because, Zoe said, stepping forward and reaching up to gently pat what appeared to be empty air near her shoulder. They're very good at hide and seek. The pat produced a sleepy chirp that was definitely not human in origin. Both royal parents went very, very still. Are our children, Empress Voltura said, with the kind of careful control that suggested she was one revelation away from either laughing or crying, currently attached to your person? Attached is such a clinical term, Zoe replied. I prefer to think of them as being in their happy place. And as if to prove her point, a small orange head emerged from what had appeared to be simply a fold in her jumpsuit's collar, blinked sleepily at the assembled group, and made a sound that the universal translator rendered as, "Are we playing the quiet game? Because I'm really good at the quiet game." Rotko, the ringleader himself, looked around at the circle of adults with the kind of satisfaction that suggested he was very pleased with how well his latest adventure had gone. "Hi, Mom!" "Hi, Dad!" he chirped, apparently completely unaware that his parents had spent the last 6 hours imagining every horrible fate that could befall a small child in a space station. "We've been having the best nap ever. Zoe's shoulders are really comfy, and she smells like the good snacks, and—" He was interrupted by the emergence of Squeeb from somewhere near Zoe's other shoulder, followed immediately by Tiny, who appeared to have been nestled against her back and was now stretching with the kind of contentment that suggested he'd just had the best sleep of his young life. "We weren't missing," Squeeb announced with the logic of a child who'd never considered that adults might not know where they were every second of every day. "We were right here the whole time." Zoe knew where we were. "Did she?" Sick asked, his scanner now showing readings that confirmed what everyone could see. 3 perfectly healthy, completely content, fluffic cubs, who'd apparently spent the last 6 hours as the galaxy's most adorable stowaways. All eyes turned to Zoe, who was beginning to realize that her definition of managing the situation might not align perfectly with station protocols. "In my defense," she said, "they needed a nap." The silence that followed was the kind of silence that occurs when the universe decides to reveal that everything you thought you knew about a situation was completely, utterly, and spectacularly wrong. Emperor Grishnak was the first to break it, his voice carrying the particular tone that parents achieve when they're trying to decide whether to be relieved, angry, or impressed. "They needed a nap," he repeated slowly. "Desperately," Zoe confirmed, as all 3 cubs began the complex process of fully extracting themselves from what appeared to be a specially modified jumpsuit designed for exactly this purpose. Fluffic cubs require 16 hours of sleep per day, and they'd been running around since early morning. They were getting cranky. "Cranky," Empress Voltura echoed, watching her children emerge from their human hiding spot like the world's most adorable magic trick. "Really cranky," Tiny added helpfully, now perched on Zoe's shoulder and looking around at the assembled adults with the kind of cheerful obliviousness that only well-rested children could achieve. "But Zoe has the best snuggle spots, so we asked if we could take our nap with her." "You asked," Six said, his professional composure finally cracking as he realized he'd been hired to find 3 children who'd never actually been lost. "Of course we asked," Squeeb said, sounding offended by the suggestion that they might have done otherwise. "We're not animals. We used our words. And "What exactly did you say?" Dr. Calm inquired, their translucent form now cycling through colors that suggested intense scientific curiosity mixed with what might have been amusement. "We said, 'Zoe, can we take our nap with you today?'" Rotko explained patiently. "And she said, 'Of course, but you have to be very quiet, because the grown-ups are doing important grown-up things.' So, we were quiet." "Very quiet," Tiny added proudly. "The quietest," Squeeb agreed. "You were so quiet," Gron said, all six of his arms now hanging limply at his sides, in what appeared to be the physical manifestation of administrative defeat, "that we thought you'd vanished." "We didn't vanish," Rotko protested. "We were right here the whole time." Zoe walked us all around the station during her work rounds. "We saw everything. The hydroponics bay smells like growing things, the observation deck has the best views, and the cafeteria has 17 different types of snack dispensers." "You've been conducting your regular duties," Eula said to Zoe, "while wearing 3 children." "Mobile childcare," Zoe corrected again. "And they're very well-behaved passengers. They don't squirm during meetings, they don't make noise during important conversations, and they're excellent at sharing snacks." "This is—" Gron began, then stopped, apparently unable to find words for what this was. "Brilliant," Sick finished, and everyone turned to stare at the bounty hunter with expressions of surprise. From a tactical perspective, it's absolutely brilliant. They were hidden in plain sight, mobile enough to avoid detection, and comfortable enough to remain calm throughout the entire situation. "Are you saying you approve of this?" Eula asked, her crystalline armor shifting to a shade that suggested she was questioning the sanity of everyone present, including herself. "I'm saying that if I ever need to disappear 3 small beings for 6 hours without leaving a trace, I now know exactly how to do it," Sick replied, with what might have been professional admiration. The holographic royal parents, meanwhile, had moved through the full spectrum of parental emotions and were now settling into what appeared to be a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and the kind of rueful amusement that came from realizing your children had outsmarted an entire space station. "So," Emperor Grishnak said, "to summarize, our children asked the human caretaker if they could take a nap in her clothing," she agreed, "and for the past 6 hours, they've been sleeping peacefully while we mobilized half the sector looking for them." "That's remarkably accurate," Zoe admitted. "And you didn't think to mention this to anyone because—" Empress Voltura asked. "Because they asked me not to," Zoe replied simply. "They wanted to play the quiet game, and part of the quiet game is not telling anyone where the quiet players are hiding." "The quiet game," Gron repeated, sounding like someone who was reconsidering every career choice that had led him to this moment. "It's a very important game," Tiny explained seriously. "You have to be super quiet and super still, and if you're really good at it, nobody knows where you are until the game is over." "And when does the game end?" Dr. Calm asked, with the kind of professional interest that suggested they were already composing research notes about interspecies child psychology. "When we get hungry for dinner," Squeeb announced, "which is now, actually." "Can we have snacks?" As if summoned by the mention of food, Zoe's jumpsuit began to produce soft rustling sounds from an entirely different location. Everyone froze. "Zoe," Eula said very carefully, "please tell me that's your stomach growling." "Well," Zoe said, reaching around to pat what appeared to be her lower back, "it's not my stomach." 2 small, iridescent heads emerged from hidden pockets near her waist, blinking up at the assembled group with the kind of innocent curiosity that suggested they'd been eavesdropping on the entire conversation. "Oh, come on!" Groan exploded. all 6 arms flying up in a gesture of complete administrative surrender. "How many children are you carrying?" "Just these 2, Zoe said, as the gossamer larvae began their complex process of unfolding from what appeared to be specially designed pouches. "They're not technically missing. Their parent knows exactly where they are." "Their parent?" Sick asked, his scanner now showing readings that suggested he was either having equipment failure or dealing with the most unusual childcare situation in galactic history. "Gossamer larvae need constant temperature regulation during their development phase," Dr. Com explained, apparently deciding that if they were going to have a completely surreal conversation, they might as well make it educational. "Human body heat is ideal for maintaining the necessary thermal consistency." "So you're telling me," Emperor Grishnak said, slowly, "that our children weren't the only ones hiding in your clothing." "They weren't hiding," Zoe protested. "Everyone was exactly where they were supposed to be. The cubs were taking their required nap, the larvae were receiving appropriate thermal care, and I was completing my regular duties." "It's called multitasking." "It's called—" Gron began, then stopped, apparently realizing that there might not be a word in any language for what this was called. "Efficient," Six suggested. "Terrifying," Eula countered. "Revolutionary," Dr. Com added. "Can we have those snacks now?" Rotko interrupted, apparently deciding that the grown-ups had spent enough time talking about things that weren't food-related. And somehow, that simple question from a small, furry child who'd just spent 6 hours as the most successful stowaway in galactic history managed to break the tension that had been building for the entire day. Emperor Grishnak began to laugh. It started as a small chuckle, then grew into the kind of laughter that came from relief, exhaustion, and the sudden realization that sometimes the simplest solutions were also the most brilliant ones. "Snacks," he managed between laughs. "Our children have been missing for 6 hours. We've mobilized search teams across 3 sectors. We've hired the best bounty hunter in the galaxy, and now they want snacks." "The really good snacks," Squeeb added hopefully. "The ones that taste like sunshine and happy thoughts." "I think," Empress Voltura said, her own laughter joining her husband's, "that can be arranged." And as the emergency protocols were finally cancelled, the lockdown lifted, and the normal chaos of the galactic childcare station resumed, Zoe found herself with an official new position, mobile comfort specialist, with a salary increase that reflected the complexity of providing simultaneous childcare to multiple species. The cubs got their snacks, the larvae got their thermal regulation, and everyone learned that sometimes the best hiding spots weren't hidden at all. They were just disguised as perfectly normal, everyday human kindness. Though the next day, when Zoe showed up for work wearing what appeared to be an even more modified jumpsuit with additional pockets, everyone agreed that perhaps a small addendum to the employee handbook might be in order,